All right, we're live.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Council of the County of Lennox and Addington. I call the meeting to order at 6:18. For those observing online, we have started a little later. That's entirely my fault, for which I apologize, and I will endeavor to ensure it does not happen again. Adoption of the minutes, regular monthly meeting held February 12th, 2025. Can I get a motion? Councillor Hogg, Councillor Fritsch, any edits, errors, or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof this evening? Seeing none, we move on for matters for consideration. Number one, fire first tiered response agreement, and I'll turn to the chief.
Don't believe he's here.
Mr. Jones.
I'm not sure he's available. Council.
That's all right.
I'm
We can.
available. I'm
Oh,
available.
there he is.
I apologize, everybody. Couldn't get my phone off. There we are. Through you, Warden. Yes, I want to make council aware of the agreement that was recently reached with Greater Napanee Fire Department, and share with council that we supported their proposal to adjust their tier response in reflection to the MPDS protocols. And therefore, council has to endorse this for us to allow the ministry CAC to put these protocols into the new dispatch solution, so that Napanee Fire will then be dispatched to the most appropriate calls that they so choose to go to. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Council, questions with respect to this? Councillor Richardson.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Warden, but I know that the chief and the fire chief, our newly minted fire chief that we have at the town of Greater Napanee, have worked extremely hard to put this agreement together, and it's refreshing to see that they've been able to come up with something that's palatable to both agencies. And I'm fully in support of it, and will make the staff recommendation motion if so asked. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
I will look to you in a moment then, Councillor Richardson. Any further questions? Then I'll take Councillor Richardson's motion to adopt the recommendation. Can I get a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Calver. Any further comment on the motion?
No.
Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Item number 2, award of tender JMPC. And I'll turn to Ms. Malcolm.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So this is the award of the transfer of our tender of our transfer switch. This, as you can see in this report, has been a very long process. It's something that started in 2023. What was discovered was the transfer switch, and you may recall this having done a tour of the home, where the transfer switch was actually built or installed as the building was being built. And so when we approached JL Richards about creating specs for us in order to go to tender in 2023, it became very apparent that we needed to actually do an option analysis, because this was going to be a significant undertaking, given that the building is now built. So that took a significant amount of time, as did then once the option analysis was created, then we had to make a decision and then have specs created. And so the entire process has just taken significant amount of time. You can see that RW Electric has come in under budget for the completion of this task. And I will note that The other challenge with this is that the earliest possible installation was going to be December of 2025, but because we certainly don't want to be doing something like that in the peak of winter, we would be delaying this until March of 2026. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Malcolm. Questions from council? Seeing none, can I get a motion to note and receive and to award the contract? Councillor Davison, seconded by Councillor Fritsch. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Item number 3, activation fund. I'll turn to Mr. Paul.
Hi, thank you. So in front of you is some applications or events that have been recommended by the Economic Development Coalition for our activation fund. As you're aware, we have $40,000. It's divided evenly amongst the 4 municipalities. We have an open application period this time. So whenever we have kind of a good number of applications, we bring our group together to do an evaluation. And tonight we have 8 projects, I guess, events that we could call them, that are in front of you for your approval. 3 in Greater Napanee, 3 in Loyalist, 1 in Addington Highlands, and 1 in Stone Mills Township. And I'd be happy to answer any questions with regards to that.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. I'll turn to council for any questions. Seeing none, I'll ask what council wishes to do with this and call for a motion. Councillor Hogg, moving the recommendation.
Yes.
Seconder. Councillor Hagedorn, Deputy Warden Hagedorn. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Item number 4, Lear study. Back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Paul?
Yes, so as you're aware, we're moving ahead with our Lear study. We have our consulting team in place. And really important part of the Lear study and the agricultural land study is having an advisory group that's made up of volunteers from our community. Just a little bit of kind of what the structure of governance would look like of the project itself. So we would have a working committee that would comprise of the consultants as well as local municipal staff and county staff. And we would also ask OMAFRA and other groups to join us for that. And then we would have this advisory committee that's made up of, again, residents of Lennox and Addington County that have specific expertise in, I would say, rural economic development, rural Lennox and Addington, rural land use planning. And they would really help us with, I would say, on the ground knowledge of Lennox and Addington County to help us when we're looking at potential reclassification or classification of land, changes or adjustments, additions, and all the mapping will be done by our GIS team. So they would probably meet once a month through till the fall easily. So there is quite a time commitment for that. And again, very key to the success of this project will be this group of individuals that we will be recruiting and then we'll approve at a later meeting of County Council. So what we've done is we've really set up categories. Our ultimate goal is to get a fairly diverse group that can provide a really good cross-section of Lennox and Addington County and different expertise that will help us with decision-making as we move forward. So you'll see in the report, we've really allocated positions based on farm organizations such as the Lennox and Addington OFA, the National Farmers Union, looking at milk producers, animal production, crop production, business sector, and then 3 members at large that would be predominantly residents. We do want to see a nice mix between agriculture expertise and non-ag expertise as well, because it's really important to have a real cross-section of what rural in particular looks like in Lennox and Addington County. So if council's happy with that breakdown of what the allocation of individuals may be, we will immediately go out and look to recruit those individuals. We'll have a closing date for applications the end of March, and then we'll bring back names to County Council at the April 16th County Council meeting for approval of what our committee would be composed of. So I'd be happy to answer any questions with regards to that.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Councillor Wise.
Yes, thank you, Warden. Steve and I have no objection to the composition of the committee. Just a suggestion, under the crop production bracket grains, oilseeds, orchard, maybe just put horticulture instead of orchard. That would capture market gardens, vineyards, and orchards.
Okay, great.
Well.
Yes. Okay, thank you. That's a good point.
And a question, I guess, just a little more, and maybe you can't answer this in any detail. What role would the committee have? Obviously, the sort of the technical recommendations would come from the consultant doing field studies. What would the committee be commenting on, do you expect?
I mean, there's, I guess, a couple different factors. So, for example, say there's a piece of land in Stone Mills that is maybe we're a little unsure of where it actually may lie. Is it prime agriculture or is it not? We would look to those individuals to provide us with that knowledge and expertise that they have on the ground with regards to what they've seen from crops there, or maybe it's been nothing's been farmed there for 5 years that our consulting team wouldn't know about, but these individuals would. There may be circumstances where I actually ask them to go out and take a look at that land and provide really, I guess, their viewpoint of what they believe is potentially either being farmed there or could be farmed there, or how it should be classified. So it's really adding another part of this program that's not necessarily about maps and data and analytics. It's about kind of the real news from the people who live in the community and probably have a little bit more of an historical background about what's happened on that particular parcel of land or other parcels of land across our county, if that makes sense.
No, it does. That's good. That clarifies that. And I'm sure there are examples of land that, suppose it's borderline, is it class 3, is it class 4? Prior use and crop production information, no consultant's going to know that. So that would be local knowledge for sure. So
yeah,
okay, thanks.
Exactly. Okay.
Other members, questions of Mr. Paul? Then I would seek a motion from council. Councillor Wise, moving the recommendation. Seconded by Councillor Calver. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Item number 5, hot mix paving program. Now I'm looking for Mr. Wagger on my screen. There he is.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you. Just like to point out, this is our report for our annual hot mix. Staff are recommending award to Green Infrastructure Partners. They were low bid, as well as the first rank score as well. This project actually is projecting to come in about 660,000 under the 2025 budget allocation. I'll be happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Thank you, Mr. Wagger. Questions from council? Councillor Wise.
Yes, thank you, Warden. Chris, the first item that you list there, 4.2 kilometers on County Road 4. Just jog my memory. Isn't County Road 4 due for that section due for some reconstruction in 2028 or something, or am I confused?
Not that section that I'm aware of. I can double check and get back to you, but yeah, this is the only section of County Road 4 that hasn't been reconstructed.
Yeah.
Everything else has been reconstructed up to Tamworth. Now there is actually a section west from Tamworth, from I think it's Ballpark Lane, west to County Road 4, that is around that 28 30 year. But yeah, I'd have to go back to the capital budget to get that exact date.
I'm just confused. So this would be, you're calling an asphalt overlay, so you don't have to remove the existing surface. This is just a bonding to that surface. Is that correct?
That's correct. So this is another tool in the toolbox that we use. We, instead of doing a reconstruction or a full rehabilitation where you're pulverizing and then you're bringing in about 6 inches of new granular, and then you're doing 110 millimeters of new asphalt. We're doing this process about 5 years sooner than that other process. We're using a SAMI overlay. So basically we'll just do a little skim coat to reshape it and reprofile it. We put a stress absorbing membrane down to stop any reflective cracking and add a little bit of strength. And then we only put a 50 millimeter lift over top. So we're really using the existing strength and the existing materials. We're saving a lot less materials. It costs about 40 to 50% less in money to do this work. And it's obviously a lot less greenhouse gases as well. And we only lose about 2 to 3 years of overall life expectancy compared to the full rehabilitation method.
Right. Thank you. It's certainly timely. It is getting a little rough, and some of the bike lane shoulder is totally deteriorated near the top of the hill going down into Centerville. So glad to hear it. Thanks, Chris.
Other members of council, any questions for Mr. Wager? Seeing none, I'll call for a motion. Councillor Davison, seconded by Councillor Fritsch. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Number 6, franchise agreement.
Thank you again through you, Mr. Warden. So the first and second readings for this agreement came to council back in March. Through the process, it did go to the Ontario Energy Board. In addition to that, there was a resident group that did identify some concerns. Through the process, that group did withdraw their concerns, and the Ontario Energy Board has issued its decision, and this agreement is ready for council approval. And I'd be happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Thank you, Mr. Wager. Questions from council? Seeing none, the recommendation is simply to note and receive. Can I get a mover? Deputy Warden, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Item number 7, reserves, reserve funds, accumulated surplus, and long-term debt. Over to Mr. Day.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and through you. This report is to get council's approval of our allocation of our 2023 surplus, which was about 5.9 million, which we discussed with our audited statements back in January. It represents about 6.26% of our 94.5 2023 budget, which is within line from KPMG compliance for a municipality or a county our size. With that, in the report, through Mr. Warden, there is a couple of tables there. I do have them on slides if you'd like me to share my screen and put them up on slide for council's review and for the public to see.
Please do.
Okay. You see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a breakdown of the 2023 a surplus and an explanation on where those surpluses from our budget levy were created. And you can see the majority is in from healthcare services, and we can see that where those larger amounts came from. Obviously, a JMPC Center has quite a large surplus of that due to the extra funding we did receive, and we have been budgeting for it to get to our 4 hours of care. So with that being said, we're looking for council approval on the allocation of this surplus to the following reserves. And you can see we're allocating a recommendation based on those funds. We are looking at putting quite a big chunk of that reserve balance into the paramedic services reserve to help finance, as we know, going with the new EMS base in Loyalist Township for that. Along within the report, you see there's a detailed explanations on what the reserves for and the accumulated surplus along with what projected 2024 reserve balances will be subject to audit, a final audit and adjustments for year end. With that, here's a breakdown of the total accumulated surplus and reserves. You can see the allocation based on what staff is recommending to it, and then with the 2024 estimated adjustments to be done, what the projected balance will be moving in for 2025. I would like to point out that the long-term debt, when you looked at Meadow Lane mortgage, as we discussed before, that will be paid off in October 2026. That 340,000 balance that is due on that. What also is of interest is our interest in Lennox and Addington and Kingston Frontenac Lennox Health Unit, since they have merged now to the Southeast Health Unit. For 2024, for year end, we still will have a 21.3% share of that, but moving forward from 2025, it's still yet to be determined how the accounting treatment will be that of the new entity and how the Kingston Frontenac Lennox and Addington Health Unit will be dissolved based on accounting. So those discussions will be ongoing on how we treat that. And I think one good thing is that auditors are the same for the old health unit and ourselves, just for the accounting treatment to come up with. So that being said, this is a summary for your approval, and we're looking to allocate that. And our budget papers for 2025 were prepared based on these allocations. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Questions from council with respect to reserves? I'm not seeing any. What are council's wishes? Councillor Wise?
Yes, I'll make the recommended motion to note and receive.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hogg. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Item number 8, assessment and tax policy decisions. Back to you, Mr. Day.
Through you, Mr. Warden. Before you is a detailed report on our tax assessment and ratios and maybe some policies that council may look at. Per the report, as mentioned before in our first budget meeting, our net growth of assessment was 1.83%. That represented about 660,000 for additional levy based on our 2024 rates. I do have another PowerPoint presentation to go through, Mr. Warden, if I can share my screen once again, and we can go through it as well. Okay.
Yep, please do.
Okay, just want to make sure everyone can see my screen, and we'll.
I can. Yep.
Okay.
Getting thumbs up.
Okay. Basically, I just want to go over an overview for council and for public that might be viewing tonight. Taxation, as you know, is impacted by the county municipal education levy requirements, property assessment, and tax policies. Responsibilities, obviously, county, we set our taxes are set by us. The lower tiers set their levy and tax requirements. Education are set by the province, and the assessments are set by Municipal Property Assessment Corp. And the upper tier levels of government can set tax policies regarding ratios, but heavily restricted by the province on what we can do. Assessment, obviously, I think council is well aware. It's been based, last market value assessment was January 1st, 2016. It was a 4-year phase in, which was completed in 2020. For 2024, no reassessment was done. So for the rule for 2025 is still based on that, unless there have been changes or new additions or deletions to properties. Our total county assessment, including PILs, is $6.5 billion. Residential represents about 80.9% of that. And the weighted assessment is really our assessment times our ratios. That's where the weighted assessment comes in. And just for council's information, Addington Highlands makes up about 8.5% of the county's total, Loyalist 38.6%, Greater Napanee 36.9%, and Stone Mill about 16%. This table just actually illustrates our total assessment and what the percentage of the assessment is over the total, the taxable assessment, and then our total levy that's been based on our budget documents of a little over 38 million. And you can see relatively what their assessment is to what portion of the levy they do pay. This graph might show a little bit better on that. As you can see, the blue highlights what the levy is, the percentage of the levy, and the yellow or orange represents the percentage of assessment. So even though if you look like large industrial or commercial, their assessment is a lower percentage of our total assessment, their percentage of the levy is higher than their assessed value. And correspondingly, same thing with farm. Because they get the 0.25%, 75% reduction, they pay a 0.25 of the residential rate, that their assessment is higher relative to the portion that they pay towards the levy. So the tax rate calculation is our county levy requirement divided by our weighted property assessment equals our residential rate. And then the property assessment times the tax rate equals our property taxes. Here's gives us some example of assessment value increases. Basically, if all the different classes were to go up by 25%, the portion of assessment that they pay would remain the same. Then if shifting assessment in between the different classes, then obviously you can see the different makeup of what proportion of the different classes would pay. So at this time, Mr. Warden, I do have a short video that I would like to play that Impact has prepared, and I think it would be very beneficial for council and the members of the public to take a look at this video. It's a little under 3 minutes, but it does explain the relationship between assessment and taxes, if I'm allowed to play that.
Absolutely. I've seen that video, and it's very worthwhile, particularly if there's anybody watching in the public. It gives a good explanation.
Okay, so I'll just make sure, can you see my screen now with the Impact's website? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'll play the video now.
Property taxes are based on your home's value. What you might not know is that an increase in your home's value doesn't necessarily mean your taxes will go up. To explain, let's take a look at how your property taxes are calculated. Imagine there's a town that only has 3 homes, and they're each worth a different amount. The total cost to provide all of the town's services is $1,200. This is collected through property taxes. Each homeowner pays property taxes based on their home's assessed value. So we take the total cost of services and divide it by the total property value. This tax rate is applied to all the houses to get enough money to pay for the town's services. Each homeowner pays according to the assessed value of their home, and every 4 years, the houses are reassessed. Let's say all 3 properties have gone up equally in value. The total cost of services hasn't changed, but the total property value has increased. When this happens, there will be a decrease in the tax rate. Now, when we apply that new rate on all the homes, everyone still pays the same. Now, let's say another 4 years has gone by, and these homes are reassessed. During this time, the house on the right gains more market value than the other 2. The total value of all the homes have increased, which means the town has to calculate a new tax rate. With this new tax rate, the first 2 homes will actually pay less than the home on the right that was reassessed at a higher value. Since the cost of services hasn't changed, the town doesn't need to collect more property taxes on the whole. However, since property taxes are based on a home's value, taxes for each individual home could potentially go up or down based on the rest of the homes. So, what happens when the cost to provide services goes up? Well, it means more property taxes need to be collected from every home, and a new tax rate is calculated. To get the new rate, we take that amount that the town now needs and divide it by all of the property values. The new rate is applied to all the homes, and now everyone has to pay the new tax amount to continue to fund the town's services. So, let's review. 1. Property taxes are based on the assessed value of a home. If all assessments go up equally, everyone pays the same. 2. If all assessments do not go up equally, there's a redistribution of the tax. 3. If the town's cost to provide services increases, the municipality may choose to increase the tax rate. When this happens, everyone pays their share of that increase. And that explains the relationship between property value and property taxes.
So I thought that was a very beneficial, quick and easy. There is some other parameters in there, as he did mention, where we get some of the differences of every reassessment year. As council is aware, some property classes could go up more relative to some other ones. Prime example was last reassessment farm class went up relatively higher than the rest of the property classes, and the reassessment for that was waterfront properties had a drastic market value increase. So that being said, the tax ratios, obviously they express that relationship for each property class bears based compared to the residential class. And it impacts the municipal and county tax rates, and the province establishes the education tax rates. It doesn't change the total dollars, it just changes on who pays on that distribution of the levy. With that being said, you can see this graph illustrates same assessment, but how the weighted assessment changes, and that weighted assessment is what we use to calculate the tax rate. So you can see what the ratio changes on the proportion then of the different classes and what they do pay. So here's what our current tax ratios are within the county. As you can see, that we have not had a change in the last few years, and if there is any change, as mentioned earlier, it does just redistribute the taxes to the other level. And in the report, if we had a 1-to-1 ratio for all the properties, it would be over an 8% increase to the residential rate if everything was the 1-to-1, if we had a tax ratio of that. Again, also in the report, I did some of the examples. If you had a 10% reduction in one of those in the multi-res class, it's a 0.3% effects to all the other classes. And in the residential, that would equate to about $20 per $100,000 of residential assessment. Correspondingly, if the commercial ratio was decreased by 10%, it would be a 0.7%, which represents about $47 per 100,000 of residential assessment. And industrial, if it went down 10%, would be 0.2, and that represent about $13 per 100,000 assessment. And large industrial would be 0.4 or $27 per 100,000 assessment. This you can see in the report. The schedule also did a summary of the 2024 ratios between Eastern Ontario. If you do look at the bottom, which is the bottom of that schedule, is on that Appendix A is the cities across the 401, basically Quinte West, Belleville, Kingston, and Brockville, and we're very competitive with our ratios compared to them. Plus, we do have the TEAG grant program for any new industrial properties that are being built, that the tax increment equivalent grant that we do have in place at the county, which that does make us a competitive in that regard. So here's some of the changes that have happened over the years. I do want to mention what is new for this year, as you've seen in the report, was the new aggregate extraction property class that was created from the province, and this is mainly due, I think, from that industry lobbying the province to make changes on their assessment. They were classified as industrial, which we had as a ratio is 2.17. So they created a new class. For council's reference, we have about $5.5 million in assessed value for these type of properties. So that ratio was determined through a regulation by the province to be 1.765743. So we do lose some money, or not really lose money. It gets shifted to the other properties to make up that difference. And that created a difference relating to roughly $27 per 100,000 of assessment that got shifted to the residential ratepayer due to that ratio change. When they originally announced this, the ratio was going to be between 0.6 to 1.1, but through the regulation, it was higher, which we were glad to see, but it's still a hit to the other property classes. So this is just for council's reference, a breakdown on 2024 rates with those ratios. This is from the Loyalist general rate, just the component. The C is the county portion of that bill. The M is Loyalist Township with the municipal portion. And the education is represented with the E there. And you can see, if you want to look at this as ratios that we can set, the province, even by education, they put more of the resident education tax burden on the commercial industrial classes. You can see it's $880 per 100,000 assessment compared to the 153, realizing that trying to take the strain away from residential ratepayers. So other tax policies that are in the report are obviously the optional classes that are described. One of the new optional classes that came about in April 2024, and I believe all lower tier councils had a chance with your treasurers to discuss the new multi-res construction for rental properties that are allowed to do a reduction of 35% by setting by a bylaw. Just to note, I did an update with MPAC to see if anyone had passed this. Only York Region had passed it, and City of Toronto was considering it, but no upper tier municipalities have adopted this option yet. I know when we investigated it, we tried to tie it into affordable housing. We could not do that. It's only the bylaw would only reduce the municipal portion of the taxes. It does not reduce the education portion of the taxes. So that was just for council's consideration. These are the other programs we do have in place. They're explained in detail in the report. The other new option there was the municipal vacant home tax authority that came out too with the new multi-res subclass. And that's where municipalities have an option to tax vacant homes. But from what I'm aware, there's no one that has undertaken this new taxing option, just due to the administration and enforcement of this would be very taxing on, especially on smaller municipalities to set that up. And with that, that's the end of my slide presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have, and if they wish to change any ratios. But I know in the past, since there has not been a market value assessment change, we could see a lot of shifts coming next reassessment. Who knows if that's next year? I just do not have when that is about to take place. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Day. I'll look to council for questions on assessment and tax policy decisions. Seeing none, I'll look for a motion then. Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Fritsch. Any further discussion? Councillor or Deputy Warden Hagedorn.
Thank you. I just have a brief comment on it. I'm in favor of the motion. I'm not speaking against the motion. I'm more speaking to one of the items that Mr. Day touched on. I just find it unfortunate that, as was stated by the ADM of Finance, that despite the County of Wellington successfully winning an ARB case, the province decided to hand unequal tax rates to the aggregate extraction sector. Not only is the municipal portion skewed due to the reduction, but $3 million of education taxation must be made up as well by the province, for a total of $6 million in difference in taxation than it would have been if they just left it as industrial. My concern with this is that means that industrial is not being treated equally. There's always increases, or can be increases or whatever. I always like it to be equally distributed. And from what I can see now, it's not. Another concern is that they created a new tax class specifically for the aggregate extraction. That means that, of course, the tax rate is controlled now was dictated by the province, which means this is going to be, we can assume, a permanent reduction. Having said that, this is a transitional rate with no definition of what transitional rate actually means. But typically that means that while they look at what other changes to make, this is what they've set on. So my concern with that is that it will continue to change and skew the taxation, which, as Mr. Day mentioned, I believe it was something around a difference of $27 per 100,000 assessment right now. So if the average person has a $600,000 house, that's going to make quite a difference right now. If it's skewed further, it will further put the burden on the residents and the other businesses that have to pick up the difference from what the province has dictated. I think that it would have been better to stay with the original decision at the ARB and allowed the industry to all be treated fairly. But that's my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Obviously, we're having a provincial election tomorrow. Would you want to make a motion to have a letter sent to the government to that effect, whoever the new government happens to be?
Yes, I think that would be good. Now that we can
Okay.
see the numbers and we're aware of what the impact is, I think it would be a good idea.
Okay, so I'll take that
Excuse
as
me,
an
Mr.
amendment.
Warden,
Yeah.
Warden, we still have the other motion on the floor.
Yeah, no, I'm going to come back to it, Clerk. So I'll ask first before I call the question on the first motion, whether council wishes to change any of the ratios in giving direction to staff. I didn't see any initially, but. Okay, then I'll call the question on the first motion. Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And then I'll take the secondary motion from Councillor Hagedorn to send a letter to the province. And I'd look for a seconder if there is one. Councillor Wise, any further discussion on that? Then I call the question on that motion. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, item number 9, budget update. Back to you, Mr. Day.
Through you, Mr. Warden. Yes, this report just clarifies per council's direction from the last budget meeting to include in the budget the 3 enhancements of the non-union benefits of the healthcare spending account of 80,206, the GIS technician of 46,945, and the roads and bridges contract administrative position of a budget impact of 63,000, were a further increase of 190,151. So a net levy increase for 2025 would be 1,494,866, which is a 4.17% increase, or $78.62 on the average residential assessment of 264,000. So just looking for council's motion on that to prepare the budget bylaw and tax rates and ratio bylaw based on.
Councillor Wise.
Yes, I'll make those motions.
Okay. I'll accept that motion. Seconder. Councillor Calver. Comments. Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Okay. Matters for information. Can I get a motion to receive? Councillor Hagedorn, Councillor Fritsch. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Bylaws. Enbridge agreement, 3 readings. Can I get a mover? Councillor Davison, Deputy Warden Hagedorn. Any comment? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. The tiered response agreement, a bylaw. Councillor Wise, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Confirmation of proceedings. Deputy Warden Hagedorn. Seconder, Councillor Wise. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Davison, seconded by Councillor Fritsch. All those in favor?